Hello and welcome to the 30th episode of the Ademola Bookmen Podcast. My name's Al Bond and I'm with my co-host Johnny Coughlin. Hi, Johnny.
Hey, Al, how are you doing?
I'm fabulous, Johnny. Thank you. And this week we're doing Doctor Sócrates, footballer, philosopher, legend by Andrew Downie. We ask this every week. Before you read the book, what did you know about Socrates?
Okay, and for maybe the first time ever, I have a good answer to that question. There's a funny thing in Ireland. There's an Irish urban myth about Socrates. Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not.
Okay, it's pretty fun. I heard this growing up that Socrates, so like, what did I know about Socrates? Played football in Ireland as a medical student. And this was one of those urban myths, I guess, that, it's hard to kill. So it was there for a long time. So we have a few of these things, Xavi Alonso studied as a Spanish student in a place called Kells, which is close to Dublin, which is kind of fun. Courtney Love ran away to Ireland when she was 17. We really hang on to these things for whatever reason. But anyway, this Socrates one was one that I had heard, but I was doing background research on it. And it goes back to some match report written around the time of the World Cup in 1986, if I'm not mistaken. And a fella mentioned that Socrates had played in Ireland while he was studying to be a doctor in Ireland. And he played for Shelbourne's second team. And then where it got really funny was, this was in 1986 was the article. Just one line in an article and nothing else. And then 14 years later, The Guardian, the way The Guardian do this thing where people send in questions and they research them.
Yeah, football questions.
Some Irish person sent in a message saying, there's this rumour, is it true? So The Guardian contacted the Football Association of Ireland, who confirmed it. But the whole thing was bullshit. And over time, the whole nature of it changed. He was studying in one university, and then he was playing for Shelbourne second team. The Football Association of Ireland, or someone along the line, said he was playing for UCD, which is one of the universities in Dublin. And the whole thing was that he was on the second team and he couldn't get into the first team. That was the whole thing anyway. But anyway, it all turned out to be bullshit. There was no connection between Socrates. And he denied it a bunch of times. And the whole thing just persisted because we just want to, have a little bit of these guys, I guess, in a way. But there you go. So what did I know about Socrates? I knew that there was a rumour that he played in Ireland.
So, you knew a falsehood. Yeah, Ireland only pops up once in the book, when you get absolutely spanked 7-0 by Brazil. Sorry.
And yourself, what did you know about the great man?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not much, Johnny. I knew he was Corinthians. Bit of background for me. I did live in Sao Paulo for a little bit, and Corinthians was my team. And so at the Corinthians Stadium, it's everything Socrates this, Socrates that. But really, I didn't know a great deal. I knew that he was a pseudo-politician, and I knew about the headband. He was still knocking around when I lived in Sao Paulo. It was a year before he died. And he appeared in the papers and stuff, bollocking on about bullshit, basically, by the end, because he was a sad drunk. Sorry, but he was.
Yeah, well, you could have went to hung out with him. I get the impression he was a pretty accessible fellow.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, there was. I think he hung around in a bar. People knew he hung around in that bar, and if you bought him a drink, you'd be fine.
But they said in this particular bar they didn't charge him because they brought in other people, apparently.
Well, not me, but yeah. Anyway, so that's what I knew about him. It was, it was basically, it was all the '82 World Cup. That's what he's famous for, right? The Italy-Brazil game.
And on that topic, his brother is Rai. I remember Rai actually briefly playing, because he played for Paris Saint-Germain before they were just Paris. But and he was whatever good enough to play in Europe in the French league, I guess, in the 90s. He won the World Cup in 1994. What do you think Socrates thinks of that?
Johnny, this popped up right at the end of the book where they're talking about Ray. And it just mentions and his brother won the World Cup. No more. I made a little note, investigate. And then I was like, yeah, fucking hell, I'm reading a book about the brother of the man who won the World Cup. It was absolutely astonishing. Yeah, I didn't know that about him, that's for sure. And the book just slips it in right at the end. Oh, by the way, there was a brother. I did research it. He played in a couple of the group games. He didn't actually play in the final. But nonetheless, the kid won the World Cup.
He won the World Cup, man. And I guess famously, his brother didn't.
Yeah, I wonder how he felt about being asked by the author what he thought of Socrates' record collection and stuff. What was Socrates' record collection like? I did win the World Cup. Yeah, but what was your brother's record collection like? I won the World. Yeah, but your Socrates' record collection? I thought that was funny. Just I didn't think it was funny at the time, but when I got the additional context at the end that Ray had won the fucking World Cup, it's like, oh, you've asked him all these questions about his brother.
There's a bit of a theme emerging on the Ademola Bookmen podcast in that we seem to be more interested in the great losers, your Puskasses, your Cruyffs, the guys who haven't won the World Cup.
Yeah, famous losers. Loser Cruyff, loser. No, I was super interested to do this book, though, because he really is a Brazilian legend. And if anything to go by, the last book we did on Brazilian Garrincha was, by my thoughts, the best book we've done. So I was super, super excited to do this book. Should we dive in, Johnny?
Let's just dive right in there, Al.
Okie dokie. So Socrates was born in 1954. Here's his full name. Take a deep breath. Socrates Brasileiro Sampaio de Souza Vieira de Oliveira. And he was born in Belém, which is in the northeast of Brazil.
Right, but he's a Ribeiro Preto, man. They moved. Socrates is an unusual Brazilian footballer because he's a middle-class fellow, right? His dad was kind of a self-educated fella. He really kind of worked really hard as an adult he became a tax collector. But he came from a humble enough background, and that apparently was a revenue collector. That apparently was kind of a fairly sought-after job in Brazil at the time, and they moved across the country to this particular town where Socrates grew up and where he's kind of most associated with, because that's where he started and kind of ended his football career and his political career.
Yeah, from the sounds of it, his dad really was very wealthy. There was 3,000 people applied for this job and he got it. And I think it said in the book that his salary was actually more than the president's. So it was genuinely a very highly respected job. And this is kind of interesting because Socrates goes on to be a great fighter for the working class and for the poor. But I think he had sort of some class issues, because there's one point he points out, someone says to him, it's a shame you're not the son of a brickie. I think the fact that he came from a rich background kind of took away from his message somehow.
Yeah, maybe. And sometimes with Socrates, it seems that he talked a big game, but he was pretty good at when it came to getting the best available package of it, for himself, Not to try, not to be a miserable bastard about it, but there was a bit of that, I felt.
Oh, Johnny, I'm going to be a miserable bastard about it. Believe you me, bruv. Fucking dilettante is what he is, isn't he? He dabbles, but we'll get to that.
The books I've enjoyed most are reading about eras and places that I don't know anything about, and this very much went into that category. It wasn't as much fun as the Garrincha book. I don't think it was written as well as the Garrincha book. It was a bit dry even. Did you know what he looked like? Obviously, so you were in Corinthians, you saw it at the stadium. He's quite a striking looking fellow, isn't he? Socrates.
Well, I think this is part of it. He looks super fucking cool, doesn't he, Johnny?
He looks like Che Guevara.
Che Guevara, yeah, he does. I really think that's a lot of his legend. I mean, you sent me a picture. It's look how long he is. He's all legs. He's 6'4". He's so slim. He's so elegant, and he looks so fucking cool with his headband. Yeah, shorts are so short. Oh, they're short.
Who's a player that you would say has that build? Pogba, maybe. Remember, there was that midfielder for Spurs, Dembele. He was kind of that build, wasn't he?
Moussa Dembele. He was certainly more built out than him, though. But yes, very long and lean. I'm thinking Sanderberg. Sanderberg at Fulham is not a very fair comparison with Socrates. No, I would take. But yeah, he has a very unusual physique. I mean, if you were going to actually liken him to a footballer's physique, he looks a bit like, I'm sorry to say it, Crouchy.
I think he was probably smoother. Like he's playing in midfield for one thing, which makes it even more unusual, which may be why Pogba and Dembele are reasonable comparisons. But anyway, yeah, he's quite striking. So if people aren't familiar with what he looks like, have a look. He's like a pockmarked Che Guevara with bigger hair.
Well, that's it. He got a lot of cruel nicknames. I mean, his big nickname was McGraw, which means skinny, but apparently they used to also call him Skull and Showerhead, because he looked like a showerhead because he was covered in so many spots, which is inventive, but also very mean. But it didn't really hold him back, did it, Johnny? It didn't hold him back. Not too much.
Another Lothario.
Oh, a legendary swordsman again, like we've got on our hands here. We'll get onto that. Yeah. But yeah, as a footballer, I mean, striding around. Vieira's an obvious example, actually.
Oh, yeah,
that occurs to me.
Go on, thank you very much.
Yeah, that just jumped to me. All legs, elegance, and a bit of steel. Well, he didn't have much steel, did he? I think that was one of his problems. He wasn't very strong. Anyway, so the most important thing to say, and what makes Socrates so initially interesting, is he is literally Doctor Sócrates. He completed his medicine degree whilst being a professional footballer and didn't take football very seriously because of that, which is genuinely astonishing, right?
Yeah, and I think his personality was so central in... what I'm trying to say is I don't think a lot of people could have done both, but because he is so, I guess, headstrong, difficult at times, he wanted to do both things, and he was a good enough player that they were willing to make certain compromises, but he was so pig-headed about it that he wasn't just... They just weren't... He would have just told them to go fuck themselves if they didn't compromise, right?
Well, a lesser player wouldn't have been able to do it, would they, Johnny? They wouldn't have been able to devote their time to studying.
And a lesser man.
And what's frustrating about it, I have to say, is that he could have been way better, right? I mean, if he actually dedicated himself to his football career from the get-go, what a player he could have been.
Could have been a better doctor, too, to be fair.
Have we ever brought this up before? I remember you telling me your brother was watching some kids skateboarding or something. You said, look at them. Oh, we have.
Yeah.
But this is another one of those examples. Like, look at that fucking dickhead wasting his time being a doctor. Like, concentrate your efforts in playing football, knobhead. You can be so good.
Let's cycle back a little bit about the father. So his father was a very well-read man. Socrates remembers his father burning his books when the military came into power.
They were burning books in 1964 in Brazil, and this was the climate he was born into. And at first he was used to this. When first asked about the military rule, he was approving as a teenager, because I guess that's all he knew.
Yeah, he didn't really give much of a shit to begin with, did he?
Well, he was rich and playing football and getting laid, wasn't he?
So he played for Botafogo, but not Garrincha's Botafogo, to make things more confusing. So I mentioned he's from this town, Ribeirão Preto, and there's a team there called Botafogo as well. And that's where he started out. And they were a much smaller team than the Rio-based Botafogo that Garrincha played for. So we're in the state of Sao Paulo now, right?
Yeah, we are, yeah. Little bit of advice to Brazilian football teams. Don't give your football team the same fucking name as another football team in your fucking country. It's so confusing.
He was tall, lean. He was callow. He was drinking by the time he was 13 years old. Do you remember when Garrincha was having sex with sheep? Or was it goats?
It was a goat, Johnny.
Yeah. Not all Socrates.
Yeah, the author says, like many Latin American men, he lost his virginity to a prostitute.
That doesn't add up. How can most Brazilian men have lost their virginity to prostitutes and goats? Because weren't we told it was like 99%?
Well, I thought it's projection on the side of the author, but then I realised it's Andrew Downie. So Andrew Downie probably lost his virginity to a prostitute, because I'm pretty sure when anyone says, like most men, you're projecting. There was one bit where, Socrates gets real 1970s, like Norman Mailer, like Playboy interview, like, I like whores, I really do. They're very interesting people. You just don't find people giving interviews like that anymore, do you? Like, how do you feel about prostitutes, Socrates? I fucking love them. I love them. They're great. Yeah, so he lost his virginity to a prostitute, but he certainly got a taste for it, didn't he, Johnny?
Absolutely.
Yep, a son of a bitch to the ladies. Yeah, so his first wife was his childhood sweetheart, Regina, with whom he had his first four children. Is that right?
Four boys, yeah. The parallels with Garrincha on so many levels are so striking, right? We read a book about this Brazilian player. He played for Botafogo, who was an alcoholic and left his. He had a lot of children with his childhood sweetheart, and then left her for a singer.
For a singer, yeah, a glamorous singer.
You're talking about Garrincha? Oh no, a different player.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, so he was studying medicine with this other fella, Zé Bernardes, who comes back later, tries to help him out when he's sick much later in life. And these fellas were like, they would play a match for Botafogo, and then they'd walk out, and their buddies would be waiting in a car, drive them like 5 hours across the state to play some kind of inter-varsity game, and they just get smashed. These guys were getting hammered all around the place. So on one hand, he's really dedicated to his studies, but it's more that he's really dedicated to being a student, isn't it?
Very much likes the student lifestyle, doesn't he?
As you say, if he was, because the guy Zé Bernardes is playing for the same team, and he says, I wouldn't have gotten away with it.
Yeah, it's only his spectacular skills which allowed him to get away with it. And he does well for Botafogo, right? He scores, I've got his numbers here, plays 99 times for Botafogo, SP, and scores 35 goals between 1973 and 1978. He is a proper 24-year-old by the time he comes to the attention of Corinthians, the team that he is indelibly associated with.
Yeah, and he doesn't play for Brazil until he's 25.
He could have been playing for Brazil and Corinthians if he'd not been studying to be a doctor, right? I just think that has to be hand in hand. He just wasted so much.
Wasted so much studying medicine. You've got a funny outlook, don't you?
I don't think I have a funny outlook because I don't think he was a very good doctor. I mean, when he did his doctoring, they said people used to come around just to get his autograph on the prescription. Like, they'd just be like, look, I've got Socrates' autograph. I don't think he was doing much doctoring. I think it was all ego, Johnny. I think it was all ego. I think he was just showing people he was better than them. I'm better than you. I'm a doctor and a footballer. I am very harsh on Socrates, as I appear to be on everyone we do in these books. But how much doctoring did he really do, Johnny? It didn't seem to do very much. It was all just staging. He was just showing off.
Well, I think he was an idealistic fellow starting out, and he kind of was torn between medicine and football. And his father, quite rightly, pointed out that you could be a doctor after playing football, but you can't do it the other way around. So he kind of set out with that plan, but just along the way, he just got corrupted. I don't know if that's the right word, but he just became an inveterate boozer, who loved being out, being drunk, womanizing. So he started out in an idealistic way, but yeah, he didn't see through the initial plan.
Yeah, this boozing is unapologetic, Like, he will do it in full sight of fans, of media, whoever. He doesn't care. This is who I am. He tells journalists all the time, if you don't like it, get another footballer. He is going to drink and he is going to smoke, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It must be tiresome enough being around all the time, constantly jumping down your throat about who he is.
Yeah, yes. They're very self-righteous as well.
Just to really fast forward though, I did enjoy when he was in Italy because he was so out of place with that stuff, smoking a fag at his medical to prove a point, and they're all like, yeah, not really, man, they weren't carried along with it like the way that everyone in Brazil was.
Do you think that would have been cool in the 70s? Because it doesn't look cool now, does it? You just look like it's like the straight-laced, uptight Italy. I can't possibly function here. It's crazy. Like, Italy? What? Really? Italy in the 70s was like just super straight-laced? I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, Maradona had a similar problem, didn't he? Like, oh, bloody Napoli. Just, it's so boring. Can't do it. That was at the same time. It was at the same time. Oh, God.
They went there the same year, yeah.
Yeah, it's astonishing. Well, maybe Socrates should have gone to play for Napoli. Oh, God, can imagine. But yeah, so he hated him. Anyway, so let's go back to Corinthians.
Yeah, so just to set the scene for the Corinthians thing, because it's significant. 1st of April, 1964. That's when the military coup, President João Goulart, I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, was overthrown by the military, which we know from our Garrincha review. And that began 21 years of military rule. So, and over time, there's a new constitution in 1966, the closure of Parliament in 1968. And significantly for Socrates, given what he was doing, student politics was made illegal. And then people he knew in his university were being arrested. But at this point, he just didn't care.
No, he didn't. He dabbled in student politics, but like just dicked around, didn't he? He just made stupid things, and like when he looked like he would get elected, like backed away. Dilettante. Okie dokie. So yeah, but this association with Corinthians is where he sets up Corinthians democracy, which actually did play a part in bringing back democracy to Brazil in the 80s, and also introduced a figurehead in Lula who would eventually go on to become president of Brazil.
President now.
Oh, he's president. Yeah, of course he is. Yeah, he's come back.
Can I give you a quote from Lula?
Yes.
Corinthians democracy helped take the message of change and democracy to lots and lots of people. Corinthians is one of the biggest teams in Brazil, and seeing players putting democratic ideas into practice showed how important the fight was. It's not exactly JFK in terms of the language, but, you get the point, right? How big it was. So what exactly, put you on the spot, was Corinthians democracy?
Well, Corinthians democracy was the running or the attempted running of the club by the players. The players would choose, the manager of the players would choose how they went about things. And this was meant to set an example to the people of Brazil as well, how working together people could run things as opposed to being dictated to from above. And as I say, this was reasonably effective. But what was Socrates' actual motivations for beginning this? Well, first of all, he joins Corinthians, the team with which he is forever associated, and starts off by saying, I don't support Corinthians, I'm a big Santos fan. So smart move, mate. Smart move right from the get-go. But this is him, right? He's just a natural contrarian. There's another quote, which let me find it, which is my absolute favorite quote from the book. He's renegotiating a new contract with Corinthians, and he says, in the midst of all this, I don't yet love the club. I see myself much like an employee to the multinational. He's one of our own. He's one of our own. Socrates. He's one of our own. He doesn't love the club, and he feels like he's an employee at a multinational, but he does eventually learn to love the club, although he absolutely fucking hates the fans so much and always won't celebrate goals in order to spite them. What a love affair.
Yeah, that is actually all quite fun.
I think he gets his car smashed up. I think I read 3 times by Corinthian fans over the course of his... I think that we've got a rating system for the book there, Johnny. Smashed cars.
Fighting in the stadium and stuff like that when they're trying to lynch him at various points. Because I mean,
at various points as well. Like, it's not just at the start; it's at various points in his career. This legend of the club, there are times he would have been cheerfully murdered by Corinthian supporters. Yeah. They don't fuck around. The Gavoes de Fiel, I believe it means like the faithful hawks, and that's the name of the Corinthians ultras. And when I was in Brazil, they lost a game to Santos. And the drive back from Santos, it's a couple of hours, and you go through a big tunnel through these mountains, and the Gavoes de Fiel, the ultras, closed off the tunnel and like got all the players off the bus in the tunnel. No one could do anything, and like personally threatened all of them. They better improve their shit. Like, they don't fuck around. And I'm pretty sure that's when Brazilian Ronaldo was playing for them as well. They don't take no prisoners there.
Wow, that's something, isn't it? To get you back on track, because it is funny. What was his motivation for starting Corinthians democracy?
Is so he didn't have to go to the Concentrao, right? That's the Concentrao being the act whereby players 1 or 2 days before a game are made to join each other in a hotel so they can focus on the game.
This is his true lifelong passion.
Yeah, the military dictatorship in Brazil wasn't good, but fucking hell, it wasn't as bad as the old Concentrao. What do you mean I can't drink and smoke for 2 days? What?
That was it. That was it, wasn't it? Ultimately, this fella, fuck you, I'm not going to your hotel. I plan to be drunk for those 2 days.
I will be boozing and pulling women. I do not intend to be concentrating on the game.
So if you fast forward to right at the end of the book, his very last job in football, he comes back to manage a friend's team. near Rio, a small team. They're trying to make it big. And he tries to, whatever, bring back a kind of this Corinthians democracy idea. And of course, he starts with a vote about the concentrao. He loses 40-1.
The one being Socrates. I think you can call that a landslide. That must have hurt him, right? That must have hurt him. It's like, I understand these people. I know what they want. I understand them. Oh, no, I don't. It's just me that really hates it. I mean, I think it's a thing in British football as well, right? Everyone goes and stays in a hotel the night before a game.
Socrates, like a lot of footballers, has a young family. And I guess the idea is that they just go to sleep and they have a good rest and everything.
Those fucking fascists. How dare they? How dare they? Well, it's just as well they did, because the whole of Brazil's better for it, right? If it hadn't been for the concentrate, he wouldn't have given a shit. Wouldn't have given a shit.
Well, there's something to that, I think,
I think there's a lot to it.
It says when he went to Corinthians, to go back to this thing where he was he was a weird guy in the world of football for many reasons, his personality, but also his background. So even at Corinthians, the manager would talk to him in kind of formal Portuguese and then turn around and talk to the rest of the team in slang. And I get the impression that Socrates, he spent his whole life being treated in a kind of elevated, different kind of way for various reasons. And the author doesn't say anything about him at every point saying, no, dude, you can talk to me the same way as you speak to everybody else.
No, I mean, yeah, the fighter for the people, his wages, he took a fifth of all Corinthians. This was what I was banging on about with Messi last week. But he took a fifth of all the wages at Corinthians towards the end of his career. A fifth. He used to take like a third of all gate receipts. Champagne socialist, right?
Absolutely. Anyway, so the Brazil stuff. We talk about Brazil because, you said that he's most associated with the World Cup in 1982.
Well, yeah, absolutely he is. I mean, again, this was a bit before my time. And I couldn't have told you any details about any of the other games, but everyone knows the Brazil-Italy game. It is one of the all-time World Cup games, isn't it, I think?
The author here says something like it was one of the best ever matches. Did you watch many of his goals? Socrates?
Yeah, I did. I was struck by his long shooting. That was beautiful. Just the elegance, just wafting that wand and like, boom. Yeah, it was modern enough that the football looked impressive in a way that Garrincha's didn't. That 20 years difference in their careers made all the difference. Yeah, he looked one hell of a player, didn't he?
Yeah, he was really.
But he did look lightweight. Even looking back now, he looked lightweight. He looked like a waft of wind would blow him over.
Yeah. Yeah, like he was really stroking the ball. There's one goal, was it against USSR? It's a real thunder bastard. Is that the right word? It was a beautiful goal.
Yeah, lovely. I thought he looked like a goal. Some of them look like golf shots, like just lovely. Like I don't know the names of golf clubs, but yeah, whack, just lovely straight leg, lovely goal.
Well, so they won every game in the group, beating USSR, Scotland, and New Zealand with a bicycle kick from Zico in the game against New Zealand. And then they beat Argentina. It was a round robin in the 1982 World Cup after what the fuck? How does that even work?
Old football was so mental, wasn't it? A round robin. And that's how it was. It wasn't even the final, was it? They just had to get a draw against Italy to go through. Because it wasn't really it wasn't like a knockout game, like a semi-final. It was a tiny little league and they just needed the draw, but they couldn't get it. I noticed before when he was playing for Corinthians, they were in a final of one of the local leagues, and it was the best of three. Because, that's what you do with football games, isn't it? Best of three.
Maradona getting sent off. That was nice for a stamp.
Still the GOAT.
The purpose to this book is it written by Johan Cruyff, or is it just quotes from Johan Cruyff, where he says essentially that the defeat of Brazil by Italy had a really profound knock-on effect on football, because the beautiful football of that Brazil team was beaten by this really horrible negative football of Italy. And that kind of came to be, I guess, a football, like kind of in vogue in football tactics. Italy were very much the less favoured team. Also, Paolo Rossi, did you know that he got a 2-year ban for match fixing? I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that either.
He scored 3 goals in that game, if I'm not mistaken. But they're the first goals he scored for Italy for 3 years. because he'd been banned for most of those 3 years.
It was nice that Johan Cruyff was so nice about Brazil, because this is what Socrates said about the Brazil team. We play like Holland, except we have better players and don't miss so many chances. Thanks, mate. Well, you did miss some chances, you fucking arrogant prick. Also, there was a bit in this book where, before the World Cup finals, Socrates polled people as to in which way he should lift the Jules Rimet trophy upon completing the victory of the World Cup. Like, how should I lift it? Should I lift it like this? Should I lift it like that? It's a little bit hubristic there, fella. How should I win? How should I lift the World Cup trophy? What an insane question, which is defended by the author, by the way. Like, you need to understand Brazil to understand the context of that.
Yeah,
wow.
Well, he says that, and this was in the Granger book, that was Bellini the name of the captain in 1958, and a journalist had asked him to lift the trophy up for some reason, and that's the reason that people lift trophies over their heads to this day, according to both the authors of both books.
I mean, you can't hear this, listeners, but that's me looking skeptical. No one had ever lifted a trophy before that. Just what do you do with a trophy? Just diddly-doo. Just keep it down, diddly-doo, pass it to you.
And Dunga was the first to kiss a trophy as late as 1994.
Bollocks. It's got to be bollocks, hasn't it? Like, oh, mate, look, I am going to find pictures of people kissing and raising trophies.
Oh, there's definitely a picture of Maradona kissing the World Cup in 1986.
Maradona would have rubbed his dick against the World Cup for sure. Like 1,000,000% Maradona's dick has touched the World Cup at some point. Don't you reckon? If you had to guess. Your silence speaks volumes, Johnny.
I can't imagine a situation where I would have to guess. In that Italy game, Socrates scored in that game. He scored the first equaliser, and Zico did a tasty little piece of skill, little back heel.
Zico's a name I've always been aware of, but then I googled him. It's just like a middle-aged old white bloke. It's so disappointing. Like Zico. Oh, that's what he looks like. Looks like a pharmacist. Brilliant.
When they were there at the World Cup, he was writing this journal for a newspaper and just complaining all the time about being in the hotel, and he just wanted to go home because he was so bored in the World Cup. It was really boring to play in the World Cup.
Yeah, he should have started a Brazilian democracy, like, and only had the World Cup staged in Brazil, like that real democracy there. Yeah, you've got to go to somewhere to play the game of football, Socrates. You don't seem to understand that. Like, why do I have to go to these places? Like, you can't play every game at home, son. But it's just as well they didn't win the World Cup, because he said, if I'd won the World Cup, that would have robbed me of my motivation. What fucking motivation? You haven't got any motivation. You're always out boozing and shagging.
Sorry, just in terms of the game itself, they said afterwards that if they played that game 100 times, they would have won 99 times. Dino Zoff, famous Italian goalkeeper, made 18 saves to the Brazilian keeper's 4.
They went back to Brazil as heroes. They weren't like castigated like other failures, right? People were proud of their team this time.
Yeah.
So we kind of got away with it in a way that other Brazilian footballers have not, upon failing to secure trophies.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they go back and there's this. So he's really agitating for a public vote. There's an economic downturn, the military kind of on the outs, and they're talking about slowly bringing back democracy, and he's pushing for him and others obviously are pushing for a public vote. He's become a public figure as a result of this Corinthians democracy thing, and he wants this public vote like an actual election. And then there's a bill put to Parliament about whether or not it'll be kind of like a selection rather than an election. And it like, talk about hubris. He says, if this passes, I will stay in Brazil. It didn't pass.
But this is used as an example of his heroism. Like, look how brave he was. Like, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to fuck off. So he fucks off. He didn't get what he wants, so he fucks off. Like, I'm not dealing with it. So he fucks off. I really found that astonishing. And everyone was like, oh, what a hero he is for doing that. Yeah, whilst he was at Corinthians, it was fun to see. They started off as playing heavy metal football. I think this is long before Klopp. But they moved on to power pop. I don't know what that means. And then by the end, it was jazz. Earth, Wind and Fire football, it was described as, which sounds pretty
nice.
fun.
That is nice.
And here's a name of some of the players as well. Like, I don't know, Brazilians do names. Vladimir, Zenon, Casagrande, and Biro. It's Biro. How'd you get your nickname? Oh, a bit of a writer. I was making notes. Now, I don't suppose you happened to look up Biro, did you?
No.
To see what he looks like?
I'll do it right now.
Give yourself a treat, lad. Give yourself a treat. He is the most ridiculous looking man in the world. The most. Check him out. He looks like a Biro. You got it. Bubble perm. Oh, baby. A blonde bubble perm on basically Big Phil Scolari's face.
Actually, the author said this was before Carlos Valderrama, right?
Yeah. Don't you tell me that's as good as Valderrama's. It's not. It's nothing like Valderrama. I think he even admits it, but he should.
That is nice.
So, yeah, he was very much as you say, a Lothario. But the author gives him a bit of a pass. He goes, Socrates was in his own way gallant, never boasting about his conquests. Oh, that's good. A married man not to boast about his conquests. The bar for gallantry is pretty low with Socrates. He had dalliances with students and girls he met in bars, almost always blondes or brunettes. Poor red-headed Brazilian girls didn't get a licking, did they? What fucking colour hair do you want? Almost always blondes or brunettes. And the other variety of hair colours that you'd find in Brazil, like green and blue. Those girls didn't get a look in. Oh, talking of cool name players, there's a Brazilian player called Roberto Dynamite. Boom!
Oh, yeah,
I wrote that Dynamite.
I wrote that one down. It was before this, and before he went to Fiorentina, is when he was with Rosemary, the singer. He had a lot of affairs, but this one went on for a long time, and he very much thought about leaving his wife, Regina, for Rosemary, but he didn't. And he went off to, he's a crazy man, right? So he'd be playing, so his Corinthians are in Sao Paulo, right? And she was at Rio, and he would fly back and forth like a couple of times a day.
Horny much. Yeah, he loved music as well, didn't he? In fact, he released his own album.
Did you listen to any of it?
I did, Johnny. Did you see how many plays it had on YouTube? 6,000. Now it's got 6,002. It was pretty rubbish. Corny old folk songs from Brazil.
Yeah, country kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and he very much doesn't look cool on that album cover. I mean, he is not the cool, bearded, headbanded man that you saw in 86 and 82. By no means. He looks like a dork with a guitar. So,
yeah, the Fiorentina stuff I liked because he was such a fish out of water. He goes to Italy and they're not really on board. Not that they want people to be like stuffy and all the rest of it, but it just was kind of funny.
I just think the whole Fiorentina thing is incredibly frustrating. He didn't try to make a go of it. He just didn't try. He decided he didn't like it. As you say, he was smoking at his medical. It was never going to work, right? Why should these people say, yeah, fair enough, do what you like? And by this time, he was a fading force as well. So you weren't even getting the very best of Socrates. You were just getting like a 30-year-old man who'd smoked and drunk his whole life and who was in no way applying himself to the job in hand.
There was some affair going on with players' wives, and there was cliques, and one clique wasn't passing to the other clique. And one day, the Argentinian hard man, Daniel Passarella, essentially subbed himself off. And then when everybody came back in, he said, there's nothing wrong with me, but one group is not paying to the other group. And we're playing again on whatever day. And if it happens again, and he's talking to the captain of the team, he says, if that happens again and your group are not passing to the other group, I will take myself off again and I will be waiting for you at the side of the pitch. Apparently Passarella was such a terrifying person that was enough. And then people just started passing to each other. I quite like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fabulous.
The Fiorentina thing is a total bust, really. And he wants to go back to Brazil. And he kind of returns and is hailed. He's signed by this team, Ponte Preta. He comes back and there's a big unveiling, but there's a bit of a problem. They hadn't actually signed him. So he had to go back to Fiorentina. And they told him to fuck off.
As well you might. Yeah, it's just really sad, and it's sad the end of his career. He just plays for a bunch of teams. Well, let's just read out his teams here. I've got 73 to 78, Botafogo, SP. 78 to 84, Corinthians. 84 to 85, Fiorentina. 86 to 87, Flamengo. 88 to 89, Santos. You see what we're getting here, diminishing returns. 89, Botafogo, SP again. 1989. And there's one more entry. 2004, Garforth Town. What the fuck is that doing in there? It is an insult. It is an insult to his Wikipedia entry. They talk about his clubs, and about a quarter of the text is about fucking Garforth Town. It is absolutely outrageous.
There was one funny thing about that, though. So this was after his career, obviously, and he was brought over essentially to kind of promote some guy who was promoting futsal, and he played against, was it Tadworth Albion? Played half a match against them.
Anyway, 14 minutes.
14 minutes. Anyway, he was going around the place with the owner of this team, who was this man's name is Simon Clifford, and he was a teetotaler. And Socrates was like, "Come on, the fuck, man, will you just drink?" Your man was like, No. He's like, "Okay, why don't you smoke then?" And the guy was like, "Well, I did smoke a little when I was a kid. Okay, give me one cigarette." He was still smoking 9 years later.
I mean, what kind of pussy is Simon Clifford? They just say, "No, I'm all right, I don't smoke." It's all right, we'll do. Oh, just don't do as you're told. Yeah, and that's it. Right at the end of it, like you have his obituary, like the legacy comments in the Wikipedia. One's from Ronaldo, one's from Dilma Rousseff, the president of Brazil, and one's from Simon Clifford. This fucking hell.
He never won a national title in Brazil, right? He won a bunch of these kind of regional titles, but he never won. And so the Brazilian league, even though you've read 2 books about players who just played in Brazil for most of their careers, I'm still totally and utterly confused by how it works. But they run concurrently a kind of a regional and a national title. And just like 50 teams in the league. What? Like, I don't understand at all.
Oh, it is insane. Yeah, and the local ones last much longer than the national ones. I mean, back in the day, like, well, they played in the local leagues, they played in the national league, and then they would just fuck off to play weird friendlies anywhere in the world at the drop of the hat, right? At any moment, it's... People talk about that. Remember when Spurs flew off to Australia after the end of the Premier League, and there was like fucking rampant commercialism now. It makes me sick. Look at football now. They were always doing it. Always doing it, fucking off wherever. It was nuts. Like, and what's more, the location, it wasn't like the MCG in Australia. It would be like downtown fucking Kabul, like stadium. It didn't matter where they went. It just crazy. It was wild. It must have been. I'm so jealous of these lads. The opportunities they had.
He went to Flamengo. He was kind of in and out of the team. Zico was there as well, but he was injured all the time. And I like this ad. This was at in Flamengo, and I wasn't working out. And one day he just walked off the training pitch and threw his boots in the bin and said, "That's it, I'm done." And that really was it. Like, he quit. He did go back, but that was the end of him at Flamengo anyway.
Yeah, that's it. He tried to talk him out of it, but no, he wasn't having it.
This was hot on the heels of the 1986 World Cup. And the team in 1986 weren't as good. It was the same manager who came back. They'd had a bunch of managers. The same manager from 1982, this guy, Tele Santana. And they had a bunch of managers in between, didn't work out, and he came back, and he had been managing abroad, so he essentially didn't know any of the players in Brazil anymore, so he just kind of picked the same squad as before. So that's the only reason Socrates managed to get into the squad in 1986. And they did surprisingly well. This was interesting, wasn't it? That the World Cup in 1986 was originally supposed to be in Colombia, but they ran out of money.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so they returned it to Mexico just 16 years after they last had it.
Yeah, and there'd been a earthquake, and when they arrived, like, let's say the September before, so 10 months before the World Cup, when they arrived, Mexico City was just like total leveled buildings. And this is why you mentioned Socrates and the headband, and this is why he wore the headband. He wore the headband to say essentially, it's kind of stand tall Mexico. That's what it says.
Yeah, Sigue, Mexico. It looks so cool, doesn't it? And you
It
couldn't
looks
really
pretty
call that a
badass.
political statement, right? It's not a political statement. It's just sympathizing with a country which is struggling. But yeah,
Yeah.
super, super cool and a really easy way to endear yourself to lots of people.
So they lost in penalties to France in the 1986 World Cup, and Socrates missed his penalty, first penalty in the shootout. But they performed better, I think, than was anticipated. They were expected to be kind of rubbish at that World Cup, and they did.
Yeah, I mean, just for these legendary names, eh? They went 1-0 ahead, but who pops up with an equaliser? Platini. Lovely stuff.
So he does then leave his wife for a tennis player, 12 years, his junior, Silvana Campos, and they had a kid together. He's quit Flamengo, but he goes back and he joins Santos. And again, just they really go out of their way to indulge him. At one point, they go on a tour to China, and everyone's like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" They keep adding on these games because whatever, like they're trying to make money. And Socrates is still the big kind of financial draw. And they're out in China, and then they say, "Okay, now we're going to the US," and everyone's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And Socrates, when he arrives in the US, he's like, "Fuck that, I'm going home," and he decides to go back to Brazil. And at this point, people were pissed off with him because he was being treated a little bit differently because he was allowed to bring Silvana with him. Kid Mrs. was with him throughout the whole trip.
Yeah, it's wild. And he was making 1/5 of all the money of all these games.
1/5 of all the money, yeah. At that point.
And without him, they'd make no money because he was the big financial draw. So him withdrawing, it wasn't all about him. He was letting everybody down. He let everybody down because he didn't really fancy it. He was a bit homesick.
Goes back for Botafogo, plays 5 games. His last game for Botafogo was a friendly in front of 1,000 people. So in his career, he played 700 games. He scored 300 goals in 17 years.
Yeah, that's 60 times for Brazil with 22 goals. I mean, it's a good record, but it's not the record of an absolute legend, is it?
Well, for a fellow who was kind of cut up most of the time, smoking fags, not even trying, it was not bad.
No, it was not bad. That's what's so frustrating. Just go to the fucking weight room, lad. Put some muscle on you. These lads will bounce off. Oh, if he had just some muscle, the player he would have been, as you say, like that Dembele sort of character, just like all legs and all right. I mean, he was magnificent, obviously, but considering he didn't apply himself at all, what he could have been. Exactly. And I really do think this is a lot of what his legend is just that he looks so fucking great. He just looks so cool. He really did. I mean, I don't know. If you said to me, Alistair, point at someone that looks fucking cool. Yeah, Socrates in the 80s, that was the coolest guy living in the coolest place. He was just so cool. I mean, like, there's a lot of footballers around at that time, but you wouldn't call Cruyff cool, would you? Cruyff wasn't cool. Maradona was not cool.
What? They're all cool.
He's not cool, though, is he? He's not cool. He's a little squat fucking cokehead. There's something cool about him. Socrates is cool. Pirlo is cool. Suarez is not cool.
Who's a cool current footballer?
Well, Murillo from Brazil. Murillo. Who does he play for? Oh, Nottingham Forest and Brazil. All right, I'll come up with a less personal one. Who's a cool footballer now? Cole Palmer's a cool footballer. Come on. He looks like a fucking, he is cool, though. You know he's cool.
Yeah,
you don't care. It's like Socrates. Just don't care. Whatever. Bang, goal. I can do this. You can't. I'm cooler than you. And I guess he's a bit like, so he's tall. He's a streak of piss like Socrates in a way.
He's not as tall as Socrates.
No, he's not as tall. But he's tall and he's skinny. Oh, I've got it, mate. Cole Palmer, the English Socrates.
Doesn't look quite as cool as Socrates, does it?
No, I realise what I'm saying now after saying how cool Socrates is, and now I'm saying Cole Palmer is as cool as Socrates. He's not. All right, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who's as cool.
Yeah. So that's it. He goes off to Ecuador at one stage for kind of a sorry old 2-month stint there as a manager. He's on TV. He does kind of local politics. But it's all downhill, really, isn't it? Kind of a.
I mean, he really dabbles in a lot of stuff, and he doesn't commit to anything. He does things which he likes, but he doesn't commit. He does all sorts of things, but doesn't commit. He opens clinics, but doesn't really see it through. I find him incredibly frustrating towards the end. Yeah, he gets roles as managers, but he He doesn't apply himself as usual.
Not only does he not apply himself, so he's managing Botafogo and he says to the players, just go out there and just do tricks for 10 minutes. Don't even try and score. Just trying to like be, whatever. Just be contrary, I suppose, at that point, you know. And he
and Ange Postecoglou was looking on, going, making notes there, like, Biro, you got a pen, lend it to me. What's it? Oh, just do tricks for 10 minutes. Don't try and win. Yeah, I like that.
And he, like, personally, like, he's drinking. His personal life is kind of, seems like a bit of a mess. He was married 4 times in total.
Oh, yeah. So the last wife, Katia, who is, 25 years his junior, she knows she's onto a good thing there, right? I think she does. I'm going to be pretty harsh on Katia, but well, she tries to protect him, but she doesn't really. She doesn't stop him drinking.
Well, you know, to be fair, he knew he needed to stop drinking beer, so he just drank wine.
Well, this is from a doctor. But he drank the wine with a lot of water. Yeah. That wouldn't be his. You see what I mean? He was a shit doctor. Imagine that. Him like someone coming on. My husband's got chronic alcoholism. Don't worry, I've got a perfect cure. There you go, big bottle of wine. There you go, lad. Enjoy yourself.
The wine, buddy. And he got into spiritism, which allowed him to commune with the dead.
Wow. Oh yeah, he really does go off the rails at the end, doesn't he? Like,
it's a ignominious end as well. Kind of started puking blood and. Died of like cirrhosis of the liver. Oh, that sounded. He actually died. He got food poisoning on a night out, and he just never recovered. But he had about 6 months there where he was kind of in and out of hospital, puking blood, and it sounded like a grim way to go.
But not a grim way to go, because he fulfilled his prophecy, didn't he? Right at the start of the book. Yeah, he said he'd like to die on a Sunday, the same day that Corinthians, the multinational for whom he was an employee, won the championship. And he did die on a Sunday, on the same day that Corinthians won a championship by drawing 0-0 with Palmeiras. So
what a fucking prediction if he made it, which he obviously didn't, right?
No, he didn't make it. And he certainly didn't predict he'd go out by fucking vomiting blood. Oh, God. Yeah, really depressing end to a truly great man. The pictures of him, I mean, I saw pictures of him when I was in Sao Paulo, where he's, as I was saying, yakking on about Lula at the time, who he didn't like by this time. And yeah, he was just a sorry old drunk. And he died a sorry old drunk. And that's just a real shame.
Yeah, it is. It is a shame. But that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Socrates. It's very difficult to have read this book having already read the Garincha book.
Agreed.
Because you can't help but contrast. It's just, as you say, it's the Garincha book really brings the times alive. You really feel it. You can hear the music and taste the cachaça, whatever it's called.
Cachaça.
Yeah. Whereas this is, it's not a hagiography. But nonetheless, it's very, very complimentary to Socrates. I mean, at the end, there's a quote saying, "Oh, now all he is a philosopher." By the end, a philosopher? He's just an old drunk man spouting bollocks. It's incredibly generous to call him a philosopher at the end.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that thing in writing: you show, don't tell. Show us these things about him. But there's a lot of him just telling us, Socrates is this, Socrates is that. All these positive things. And yeah, I felt that it felt a bit more forced maybe. And while the guy was trying to be so, he was trying to show Socrates in such a positive light about every single thing, it kind of made me not like Socrates all that much, if I'm honest.
No, I found him a very, very frustrating character. And he just... Although he wasn't as much of a fuck up as Garincha, like he didn't kill his mother-in-law and he never knocked his dad down in a car, he had the privilege of a good education, of a solid family, but he ended up drinking himself to death just as well. I mean, Garincha had the excuse of having no education. So for that reason, I just find Socrates a much more frustrating character. I mean, what a doctor he could have been if he'd laid off the football and the booze. What a footballer he could have been if he'd laid off the doctoring and the booze. What a politician he could have been if he'd actually applied himself and listened to people rather than doing what basically it seemed to me was always best for him.
And there's a quote there from one of his friends that Socrates was ultimately just a really selfish person who did whatever he wanted to do. He would fall in love and he would just be off the face of the planet for everyone for 2 months, and then he'd come crawling back, and when it didn't work out, and he would burn commitments, he would burn relationships. He was just a very selfish kind of individual. And it's funny to read this from an author who seems to take everything that he does as a positive when some of these things just sounded really shit.
Yeah, he wanted a revolution so he could stay in bed.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah.
By the way, just one more thing on his last wife. Yeah, the Spiritism. Yeah, his last wife, Katy, 26 years his junior, believed he could cure ailments by passing his hand over a stricken patient. He basically became Jesus at the end. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think this Katy, this last wife, as I said, she really bought into his legend and burnished it for him, which I think probably didn't do him much good. You're a great doctor. You can cure people just by being near them. Thank you, Katy. I suppose I am. Pass the wine. Oh, yeah. Oh, Sosthenes, his brother, says he couldn't find himself professionally. And if you don't have that or a stable relationship, then bohemianism takes over. Again, very, very generous. Oh, you're a bohemian. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was driving while bohemian.
Thinking of piss is just a bohemian thing.
Yeah, very bohemian. If you like Socrates, read this book. If you like old Brazilian football, read Garrincha's book.
Yeah, there's no question which is a better book for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that Socrates is a compelling character, and he seems to have been a beautiful footballer. I just didn't love the book. I didn't hate the book, but I didn't love it either.
No, absolutely. I didn't hate it either. It's a hell of a lot better than a lot of the books we read. But it's not the book's fault that it suffers in comparison with the Garrincha book.
Yeah.
So, Johnny, you got a marking system? Oh, by the way, another one. Sorry, before we go. This is the author being incredibly kind to him. Oh, he liked to give people nicknames. They were very creative. Here are some of them. Little Baldy, Cripple, Asshole, and he called Roberto Baggio Boy George. All right. Okay. All right. That's me done. All right. So what should we use as a rating system?
Concentraos.
Yeah, let's do it. How many concentraos
can we even fucking say it?
I think it is concentrao. It's like, no, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, this is a 3 concentrao out of 5 book for my money. It was perfectly all right. 6 out of 10. Yep, I'll take that.
Yeah, I'll say 2.5 for this book.
Well, there we go. Lovely stuff. That's Socrates. He is great. It's just not that great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for tuning in. Our next episode, we will be doing the book On the Edge, the Martin Keown autobiography.
The next good is footballer.
Yeah, man. We'll be hearing about his sweet love life and his dating pop stars, won't we?
Thank you very much, Al.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Johnny, and we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, and thanks for listening, folks. Do follow us on Blue Sky and on Instagram, and like and subscribe.